Just so excited to meet you. You're just amazing, and I'm really pumped to talk to you and just have a bit of a conversation about who you are and what your life is like. And so, my first question for you is: this your first time in Alabama?
This is definitely my first time in Alabama.
Yes.
I've been to many places, but not Alabama.
And so you've been here just about a day. So what are your thoughts so far, just in what you've experienced or seen?
Well, it's a little different from what I anticipated. I anticipated a bustly area, but it's kind of like very quiet. Not because of quietness, but quiet in a way that you can sense when things are not too okay, like economically, and I would say, yeah, because you can sense it that it's not bustly because there's a lot going on. Um, so I'm still trying to get a feel of the city.
Sure.
Yeah, I went drove around and saw some beautiful areas. Up to what's it called, the statue.
Oh, Vulcan.
Yes,
Yes.
I went to the volcans and that's beautiful. But most times when I come to a place, I'm a weird soul. I'm usually not looking for the beauty of the community. As an activist, I'm always trying to feel out um, some of the, and maybe it's a bad thing. I appreciate the beauty, but I'm also looking at some of the social issues and social problems. Let me put it this way. I was in Texas once and a little girl asked me, "Are you amazed at the tall buildings?" And I said to her, "No, not really amazed at the tall buildings, but amazed at the homelessness beneath the tall buildings." So that's the kind of thing that tend to capture my attention, what has captured my attention, the empty lots, the empty buildings, and so maybe between now and I'll be able to see much more. But yeah.
Wow. Have you always have you always had that sense about you where you notice what other people may not notice, or did that come as a result of war and
No, I think I've always been that way. As a young child, I was very observant. I could feel out different things and I could ask questions according to my grandmother and my mother that normally children will not ask about things that I shouldn't be asking about. And I think for a long time I've been that way, and I've now observed myself and I'm very observant, so I'm able to get a feel of what it is. And sometimes people say, even though I know, and then I pretend not to know. So if I want to investigate further, I can pretend to be naive about what I perceive. Yeah.
sure, sure. How has that how do you think that set you up to position you for the Liberian mass action? How do you think that impacted?
I think one of the
What you
things
did?
that I recognize about this gift that God has given to me is that I'm able to strike the right conversation with people at the right time. And when we did the mass action, it was very important for me to connect with the women in ways that would make them look beyond my faults and see me as a leader. Because predominantly or most often, when women find themselves in leadership position, people tend to just focus on the outward faults, and it tends to override all of the leadership quality that you bring, that or qualities that you bring that makes the work very essential. So I was pushing back on the narrative of me as a single woman, of me as a single mother, of someone who had problem with alcohol, of someone who had had multiple sexual partners or multiple relationship, and I was trying to let them see me as that compassionate, charismatic leader who was trying to get all of us to a place where we could change the narrative of our nation. And I think it helped me because, again, you can see someone sitting when we protested. I will observe someone sitting, and yes, everyone will be reflecting, but you can look at one woman in particular and see that her reflection was beyond her thought about peace. Her reflection was probably deeper, that there is this thing going on at home. And so most times I'll go and sit close to this person and say, how are you? How is it going? And by the time we get to the fifth question, everything is out.
Sure.
And they start talking, and then the next question will be, how can I help? Or what can we do to solve this? And the other thing is, most times when I used to work with the people we're keeping company, I'll realize that if someone starts to talk about something repeatedly, you know that it's important to them. So for the women that I work with, I'll walk into the room, see some of them sitting and say, hey, how are you? How are those babies that you've been worried about? Because again, people tend to say, oh, we're professionals. I don't need to be friends with people I work with. But I tell you one thing, if you're leading a movement, the personal is political. There is no way you can tackle the political without tackling the personal, especially when it comes to women's involvement in some of the issues facing them. So that has really brought me to, I would say, being a good leader,
Yeah. Wow. The political is personal.
The personal
and the
is,
personal is political.
yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. That's really, so with the mass action, you brought together both Christian and Muslim. And in your book, you say that hadn't happened because President Doe was adamant about making sure that religion was separate and that it went beyond. What was it like when Christian and Muslim women got together and sat in a field and were praying for peace and not arguing?
It was really very awesome, and it did not just happen in that one moment. It was several months and years of work with these women. I remember the first time we deliberately said we're going to work together as women, regardless of our ethnic, political, religious affiliation or ideologies. We had to, at one point, come to the place where we said, okay, let's evaluate how we fare. Because we did some work 9 months, and then we came back and then we realized that, strangely, even though we did fantastic work, but every time we had conflict, it was around religious issues. So we had to do a session or a series of sessions. The first one we did was with just Christian women. Again, being the leader that was observing and taking notes all of the time, it became very clear to me that there were questions, not just by the women, but by the churches that they went to, about the authenticity of the work that they did. Is it God who's calling you to do this? Should this be the role of women? Shouldn't you be at home taking care of your children? So 2 things we needed to establish: that within the Bible, it has been written and it is proven that women played roles to change the tide of their society. And most times, because people who want to exploit societies would interpret religious texts, whether it's a Quranic text or a Christian text or a Buddhist text, to fit the political narrative or the political situation, we have to bring these women to a place where they see for themselves that this is not always the case. So the first day, that was the first thing. The second thing was to let them understand that a lot of the issues that they had, quote unquote issues with the Muslim women, were all prejudices, stereotypes that were not true. So we brought the Christian women in the room the first time and had a conversation with them. First thing we had to establish was, biblically, you could work. Esther's action in the Bible was political. She fasted, and then she consulted the king, and then it helped to save thousands of the children of Israel. Deborah was a judge, a prophetess, but she was also a warrior. Rahab was a prostitute, but she was involved in something that saved nations. And if you compare it to our today's time, those were political action. They were not just women's action. Because the nation Israel or the people were at a political place that they needed someone to take some political action, and these women also step in the space. We established that. Secondly, we asked them, write down all of the positive things that you believe about Muslim women, and write down all of the negative things, and they did that. The next day, we brought the Muslim women together. We needed them to also see within the Quran, they were not just relegated to the back as people, as the scribes and scholars of Islam had made them to think. Let's study the wife of the Prophet Muhammad, Khadija. She was not the ordinary Muslim woman. First, Khadija was older than the Prophet. She was a businesswoman. She was out there. She had political power as a basis because she was wealthy. So do you think she was just at home, covered up and not doing anything? So it really brought them to that place of, and once we've done that, then we went into the Quran and picked out some texts that talk about non-violence. And then afterwards, we asked them to write some of the stereotypes, positive that they had of Christian women, negative that they had of Muslim women, of Christian women. And then the next thing, we brought the two groups together and asked them to walk around the room and read. And when they got to the negative, what? No, that's not true. When they got to the positive, oh, this is so sweet, but it's not true. So they realized that even the ones that were complimenting were not true, and the ones that were negative were also not true. Then we brought in two old ladies who had been friends for over 60 years, one a Muslim, one a Christian, to tell their story of their friendship. All we needed to do was for them to tell their story. And as they told their stories about marriages, divorce, and children, and abuse, and everything that they went through in the over 60 years of their friendship, someone asked, so what role did your faith play in your friendship? And they look at each other like, are you kidding me? And so this Muslim woman, and I think that was the groundbreaking moment for us, asked the Christian woman, when you see me, do you see a Muslim? And the Christian said, no. I see a woman, a mother, a woman who has been abused and cheated on by her husband. And she just went on to tell about everything that her friend had been through. And then the Christian turned to the Muslim, do you see a Christian? Said, no. I have never, for the 60 plus years we've been friends, consider how you pray. It has never been a factor. You are my sister. We share similar pains. And the Christian and Muslim women in the room just look at each other. And that for us was the turning point. So it's easy to do this kind of mobilization if you work with people who you want to work with and bring them to see that beyond that thing that the world is describing as the divisive thing, there is something that brings them together even closer than they ever imagined.
Yeah. But it sounds like you have to be quite intentional about building relationship, about studying, about acknowledging differences in order to bring those two worlds together to initiate change. Is that correct?
You know, the way I would answer your question is that nothing that comes easy is worth fighting for. So if you want peace, it will never come easy. You have to fight and you have to push and you have to. If peace was easy to come, we won't be going far and near in different places and using our voices and not sleeping in our comfortable beds to be out there. So when you want something, you have to be deliberate about everything that you say you want.
Yeah.
So if you want to build peace, you have to be deliberate about stepping into spaces and places that you've never been, opening your mind and your heart and embracing new things. Because if you are stuck in that's what we had to do with those women. I call it a process of resocialization. We had to first work with themselves. That was the part of the Bible. It was the resocialization, that narrative of Christian women not being able to do anything but to stay home and learn in silence. And we had to break it and bring them to the place where they see themselves as fighters, as people who can make change, as part of a political process, as this and that. So you have to go through a whole process of resocialization in order for you. Say, for example, you want to do something in this Birmingham community, and you say, oh, I want to mobilize people around this cause, but I have problem with gay people. They could be one of your biggest allies. So how do you do that? You have to go through that process of resocialization, taking a step back, working on yourself and saying, oh my God, why am I like this? How do I see these people beyond their sexual orientation as humans? And I just use that that example as without any disrespect. Or say, for example, you want to do mobilization, you say, okay, I have to work with African people. You have to take a step back also and go through that whole process, all of those negative things, stereotypes, or even some of the false myth that you have that seem positive. You have to debunk, shatter everything, and go through a whole process of resocialization, re-education, everything you have to go through, and it has to be deliberate. Nobody needs to force you to do it, because you woke up one morning and said, I want to be a change agent. And in order to be a change agent, you have to just, like I tell people, your mind has to be like a plain sheet of paper, open for new writings and new ideas and new this and new that. You cannot do it if you hold on to some of those old things. Some you have to be very honest to say, I'm not very comfortable in this space. Is there someone who's comfortable and we're journeying together who can hold my hands? I tell you, for example, I did not know how to fast and pray. Till today, I don't know how to fast like other people fast for 6 hours, 7 hours. The older women in the movement who had not gone to school will come to my house at 6 in the morning, pray with me, we'll walk together to where we protested. One person will sit here, another person will sit here, and they will check on me every minute. How are you doing? What's the level of the hunger pang that you're feeling? How is it going? By 12 o'clock, if I say I can't make it, 2 of them will get up and walk with me back home, pray with me, I break my fast, and then come back and sit down. Everybody knew that. So you need to, like you said, deliberate and honest.
Wow. Wow. In your book, you talk about being a messenger for girls, telling their stories. Why is it important that the narrative of the female be brought to the forefront?
I think because there's, like we're saying about women, there have been a lot of myth about what women can do as a result of their socialization. And over time, when you think that given all of the glass ceilings that have been broken around in terms of women's work and what they've been able to do, people will be more open to embracing this new narrative of women as, just doctors, lawyers, engineers, and people who can also contribute to change. It's still a struggle.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to young women, in many societies, they're still seen as people who are not serious. They're still seen in many ways as sex objects. They're still seen in many ways as unable to contribute, and their issues are always left behind. So my thing is, my Nobel sister, Jody Williams, who's from Vermont, the USA here, says the Nobel Peace Prize is a big tool that you can use for good. And I have chosen to use this tool, this platform, as a means of elevating the important role that young girls and young women play in every society. They're not deaf, they're not crazy. There is a lot of competence and intellectual ability there. In cases where you don't see it being exhibited, is because they are chained either in a social, financial, or religious situation, and they just need someone not to come and unchain them. For someone to come and so the way I describe it is they're chained in a dark room, and they just need someone to come and put a little hole in the door of that room that they're in. The light that will come, that ray of light that will come through that door will be the thing that will make them to break the chain and break the door open. And I think that is my role. Either by advocating for their presence, advocating for resources for them, or finding resources in the case of my foundation and providing educational opportunities for them.
Wow. Have you found, can you tell us a story of a girl that you've shown the light on, poked a hole in the door and she came out?
Oh my God. Tons of them, tons of them. I'll tell you the story of a little girl we met 4 years ago. She was the only girl in her community who made it to 8th grade without getting pregnant.
8th grade?
8th grade. The only girl. And the biggest threat was that her math teacher was persistently harassing her for sex. I think she was the only girl that made it to 7th grade, between 7th and 8th grade. The women in the community brought this child to us and said, we want you all to send her to school. So we took her and put her to an all-girls boarding school. She just passed to the 12th grade. And so 3 weeks ago, I had the opportunity of doing a leadership program with 20 of our university students. She came into the program by default because one of the university students could not make it. So we said, okay, let's bring her in. She's 12th grader. And I'm watching this child. This is a little girl from a village who could barely look you in the eye 4 years ago, who is sitting amongst girls in university, girls who are not her peers, because some of them are seniors and juniors, and she's able to eloquently say, this is where I see myself in 4 years. This is how I see. But beyond that, she can write all of these things, and she has a perfect narrative, not just about herself, but about her future. And I'm just looking at this child and just saying to myself, geez, what have we done? But it was not just this one girl. It's all 20 that I can sit and tell their stories that I know from where they came up to where they came in that room. The ones who will come walk into my room and say, you know, I just have this dream for myself. I just want to thank you. I just want to do this. But beyond that, the ones that we've been able to take through master's program, who are now women of their own, writing their own life stories. Some who have graduated with degrees in agriculture and trying to find an advanced degree to go and start their own farm as a business. I look at all of these girls and I'm just saying to myself, this is all they needed. And someone will say, oh, but you provided education, I was breaking the chain. No, I just put a hole in the door. They broke the chain and now they're just running with their lives. You know, one of the girls, the first time she came, she's a Muslim, and she could barely speak up. Today, she can sit and tell you, talk about her life. At her university, she's doing her degree in biology and chemistry. She is a tutor for many students, so she goes to school early and have special sessions with friends who are suffering with their studies in biology and chemistry, and she's the one who has taken up her time to do this. The question you want to ask yourself is am I doing it? No. All I had to do was to put that hole in the door, and this girl is running with it. I can sit here and tell you about tons of those girls, but not just the ones who we are supporting financially. Some that you just sit with and have a conversation, who at the end of the day comes back to you and says, thank you for being there for me. A few years ago, my first, I would say, real kind of activism was taking 4 young women under my wings in my neighborhood. I was an abused wife and going through everything. 5 years ago, I went to vote after winning the Nobel Peace Prize. And one of these little girls was standing in line And she gave me her spot. But she kept looking at me, smiling, and I kept wondering, where do I know this child from? And she finally said to me, Auntie, you don't know me, but I know you. I said, really? She said, yes. You remember those 4 children? And that was like, so this is 2011, and that was 1993. So it was what, 18 years before. You remember those? So do the math, 93, 2011, was I 18? Or how many years? Don't do
It's
that.
18. It's 18.
All right.
You're right.
She said, the 4 girls and those 4 girl stories were that the boys were used to hunt them. They were the only 4 virgins in the neighborhood. And these boys were fighters and drug addicts and different things. She said, I'm one of those girls. I want to tell you something. This little girl's story was she didn't have a father to help her go to school. Her grandmother and her they sold peanuts for her to, so she used to come and to you if you had the money and say, my school fees is 12,000. I'll bring 6. Can you help me with 6? That's how she said to me, I finished high school. I'm now in university and I do not have a baby. Because that was one of the key things that we used to talk about. And you say, from an American perspective, so what's the big deal? She was probably 18, 19, 20, and she didn't have a child. Is normal? No, it's not. That neighborhood I came from, that she was 20 and didn't have a child, I felt like I had won the Nobel Peace Prize again. So those are the kinds of things, like just spending time in mentorship, in doing different things, in speaking up for someone in a community where no one will speak up for a girl, inspires them. It's almost like, if this person could take a chance with me, I am going to take a chance with myself.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Can you tell us about when you received the call that you had won the Nobel Peace Prize, and what was it like for you to know that they had chosen you, a mom who was a public citizen? Like, you weren't in political office, you had just done what was in your heart, and in some ways reluctantly at the beginning, and then you stepped into it a little bit more. But what was that moment like when you got that call and they said you had won?
So they don't call you.
They don't
no
call.
one calls you.
Oh.
On February 1st, 2011, there was a newspaper article that ran that I was in the running for the Nobel Peace Prize. I laughed. I laughed so hard. I was in New York doing a speaking thing, and someone called me from Liberia and said, oh, they have you in the local newspapers in the running for the Nobel Peace Prize. I said, wishful thinking. And then I remember a friend calling me and saying to me, Leymah, I just read this paper, and I saw that they say you're shortlisted for the Nobel Peace Prize. I just want to say to you, even if you don't win, by virtue of the fact that you came from humble beginnings, I see you as a winner. And I said, thank you, and that was it. A few weeks before the announcement, I get a call from a newspaper in Tokyo and in Nigeria to say, where will you be on October so and so? I said, well, I'm going to be ending my book tour, so I'll probably be on a flight coming back home. Well, we just want to know, because we want to send cameras to interview you, because we hear you are on the highlight for the Nobel Peace Prize. I said to them, please, if you all have nothing to do, don't call me again. Because in all honesty, I did not, first thing first, what I do, whatever I do till today, is not because of accolades. It's because there's a problem and I see it, I have the capacity to change it, whether it's with my voice or my little resources, and I step into that space and do what I have to do. So I come to America and do my book tour. The last day of my book tour, I was in the Silicon Valley, and Sheryl Sandberg, the COO of Facebook, had hosted a dinner at her house for me. So that night, she says, tomorrow is the Nobel announcement, and I'm going for Leymah. I said, Sheryl, stop it. I don't pull my leg, stop. She said, no, honestly, I wish you could get it, and blah, 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 blah. We laughed, ended the night, and I got on a red eye from San Francisco to New York, and then I was going to connect to Ghana. She's filled my, so I think in the entire world, I was the last to know that I had won the Nobel Peace Prize. And then the first text I see is from my friend Abigail Disney. It says, Nobel, Nobel, Nobel. I told you, my friend, that you were going to win the prize. And so the guy sitting next to me, I had not spoken to through all 5.5 hours of the flight. I said to him, sir, I think I just won the Nobel Peace Prize. And he looked at me like, oh my God, she's going crazy. The one in front of him went on his BlackBerry, Google, got my picture, looked at me and said, yes, kiddo, you definitely did. And without even thinking, I was just hugging everyone on that flight. Got down, and that's how my world has been upside down for the last 5 years.
Wow. And so you're currently living in Ghana?
I have a home in Liberia, my country. We have a home in Ghana. I went to Ghana. I tell people Liberia is in my blood. Have 60% of my heart, but Ghana has a special place in that 40%. 1990, Ghana was the country we went to as refugee. My kids lived there as refugees also, and we never really left. And so now we own a home there. So the way I describe my life is that Liberia is the storm, and Ghana is that calm for me. So when I have to deal with everything, my bustling life back home is there, and then I can go back to Ghana, where I live in a community where no one knows who I am, and I can go to the market except once in a while when I'm on TV and then someone say, weren't you the one on TV yesterday? Or so, but it's most often undercover. I can do whatever I want to do. So that's the way I do it. And now I spend some time in New York. So the way Shireen Ebadi, another Nobel laureate from Iran, puts it, we do our laundries in one country, we pay our taxes in another, we live in airports. Yeah.
You talk about in your book the importance of laughter, that the women started singing and you guys would make these songs and laugh. Can you explain why laughter is so important in balancing out the heaviness of advocacy and activism?
You need to keep hope alive in order to do, because we activism, human rights advocacy, whatever word you have for what you do, it's such a pessimistic field. You know, you gain one thing today and tomorrow you read the news. So you can't celebrate for long, but you need to find things that will keep you hopeful. And for us, it was not just us trying to bring peace. It was a combination of things. Amongst us were abused women. Amongst us were women who had lost their children. Amongst us were people who were homeless. Amongst us were different categories of women. Women who needed to be inspired every day of their lives in order for them to wake up and come and do the work that we did. So that laughter component, and so they had to look forward to something. If I was miserable at home, do you think I want to come back to a space that was filled with misery? So it was that space of sisterhood, of love, of friendship, of peace, even in the midst of war, of laughter and dance and fun. We used to do crazy things, but at the end of the day, it was what kept us together and kept us strong, even till today. Yeah.
Wow. If you had the opportunity to have a lunch with 3 people from history that have been influencers, who would you pick and why would you pick them?
I'll pick Rosa Parks without thinking. I'm trying to think. I'll pick her first because I think there's a bit of her personality that is in me, that defiant, daring kind of thing, because I would also want to talk to her and find out from her what the hell was going on in your mind. And I think she would answer me to say what the hell was going on in your mind when you were talking to Charles Taylor. I'll pick her. I'll pick Princess Diana. The reason I will pick Princess Diana is because not only was she daring, she was royalty. She didn't have to care about humanity, and no one would have questioned her, but she cared. She cared enough to, and she was using her platform to shed light on some of the darkest and deepest things that the world had seen. There are many people who are still alive that I could use as that three. Can it be alive?
Yes, definitely.
And because I'm such a rebel, the third person I would choose would be Winnie Mandela. I would choose her because I think, like most women, she has been vilified in ways that has managed to wipe her of a good legacy. I'm not saying all of the allegations around killings is good, but I think one of the things that I would want to talk to her about was her ability to sit and wait for this husband for 27 years. Most times I question, if she was in prison, would he have waited for 27 years? Yeah.
Wow.
So those would be the three, but then I would still try to add more to the table,
Sure.
because I would also want Mother Teresa to come
Sure.
and tell me some spiritual things. I will go back into the history of Africa and pick some of the women warriors like Na Santiwa from Ghana, who they talk about great. I will bring Ama Ata Edu, who is a renowned feminist poet and writer in Ghana, who I'm hoping to bring. But a few months back, I was kneeling at her feet, and she just laid her hands on me and said, "Never stop using your voice for good." And it felt so good. So I would add her to the table. Oh girl, that table can turn into a banquet, in a banquet hall of feminists from different spaces and ages and places and times. I'll also bring Hillary around that table and just ask her, how do you feel in all of this mess?
Sure.
Yeah.
What if someone wanted to step into a position of leadership because they felt in their heart that they wanted to do something, whether it be in Alabama or New York City, based on in order to help bridge the gap between the races that's going on currently in America? What advice would you give to them to begin that process?
Start small, find your allies, bite off what you can chew, and let it be a tiny piece that you can chew well, swallow well, digest well, and let people see that you've done this small thing, and then you start to build a reputation. One of the problems we have with people wanting to do movements now is that they wanted to grow fast and get recognized quick. If you look at the work that all of those great men and women did in history, it just talked about Rosa Parks. I'm sure she sat down and contemplated many days. If she's anything like me, she was looking and thinking, one day I'm going to strike, 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 and maybe 20 times, 30 times, 100 times in her head, and then one day, bam, I am not getting up. So I think they have to decide that we'll start, we'll fail. One of the movies that I like was Oprah's version of King, and someone took me, my friend Abby took me to watch it when it came out as a birthday present for me. But there were so many similarities in our movement. We never really dwell on failure for a long time. You fall, you hurt your nose, you get up because the cause was bigger than that one incident. And I remember what in that movie, after the first beating, when the people were about to cross, and then the second time when King pulled the group back, and many were upset. He had to take the blow, the cuss, the fall, and everything for all of it. I believe that in this generation, the problem with young people wanting to start movement, they don't know when to pull back and when to advance. Yeah. And I think that is one of the biggest challenge. The second thing is because of social media, generation that we find ourselves in, every movement needs a face. And it will be difficult to have a face because everyone wants to post on Facebook what they've been able to accomplish. When we did our movement, we borrowed a lot from the civil rights struggle, from Gandhi's struggle, from ANC struggle. We borrow a lot from different places. There was one face of the movement: King, Gandhi, Mandela. And so we were deliberate that even if a news outlet came and I wasn't around, no one spoke to the press. Because then, if there was a arrest that was going to happen, I was the face. I could tell the group, stand down. I could tell them, let's proceed. Let's be strategic. Let's not be strategic. Let's be spontaneous. Let's do this. But there was a voice that was commanding. The mistake young people make today also is that the voice that commands is not the movement. The movement is the multitude. But because everyone wants to be the movement, they think that voice that commands is the movement. That is the most difficult place to be. I'm speaking from experience. Because every failure is attributed to you, and every success is taken away from you. Yeah.
Wow. I'm processing that because leadership. I was having a discussion with my friend a couple of weeks ago about Black Lives Matter movement, and we were just talking about the narrative, and I mentioned to her, I said, I think the hardest part for me about it is that there isn't a leader. Like who's the person that everybody is listening to? Like everybody's rallying around this cause, but nobody's standing up and going, talk to me about it. I'm making the commands, I have the ideas.
And the problem is that until that movement can take one person and say, this is our face, this is our voice. And when we're doing in Alabama, we're flying you from New York to Alabama, so you're the face. If we're doing in North Carolina, you're flying there, you're the face. If we're doing in South Carolina, we're flying you there. And whatever you say is what our social media feed will carry. The strength of that group. And then in every city, there are co-leaders that sits with this person every month. Like Tina said today when we were talking, it's reactionary. They do not do preventive activism. You know, by now my activist head and it's naive and if I misspeak, it's because I'm from a different cultural background, a different time. So I apologize. This is not my intention to insult the Black Lives Matter, but in my mind, by this time, 3-4 years later, there should have been more conversations with police officers, leadership of cities and whatever, with the leadership of this group to say, how can we begin to showcase the positive rather than the negative? You know, because there are some positive. I was reading an article about a young man in a part of California who walks 2 hours one way to work and 2 hours another way. And This police officer gave him lift one day and asked him, he said, I'm saving to go to college. I can't take a dime from my savings to buy a bicycle, let alone a car. This guy went back to the police association and they bought this young boy a mountain bike. These are the kinds of stories that should be projected, and I'm sure there are thousands of them out there. You know, thousands of them out there. And the movement, the police associations, they all need to begin to say, how do we, bring this together? Because it's not good. For the first time, you're seeing executions of cops as quote unquote retaliation. The authors of Black Lives Matter, that was not their intention, that is not their intention.
Right.
But until there is a solid and firm kind of leadership with a plan,
Yes.
people will exploit their beautiful movement and destroy it.